So today we're going to talk about some problems that I think affect Gen Z that aren't talked about as often. So I'll be reading from a semi-script here, so that's because I tend to get a bit off track sometimes, but forgive me if I miss some parts here. So first of all, it's like literally less than a week ago that a boomer told me the reason your generation is struggling financially is because all you can spend money on is strawberry matchas and premium coffee. And it was that alone that inspired me to create this video, because you hear statements like that, or ones like it so often from your parents, uncles, aunts, and grandparents, that all you can do now is just clench your fists in rage and go like, But saying that Gen Z's financial troubles come from lattes is like saying that a bucket overflowed because you added a single drop of water to it. I mean, it's sort of true, but it misses the point that the entire bucket was already nearly overflowing anyway. Spending habits do matter, and we'll get into that, but that still doesn't explain why housing, food, education, and basic stability feel so much harder to reach than they did for previous generations. The point is that there are a lot of system-wide issues and mindset issues contributing. Some causes are partly on us, but some reasons are definitely an issue with the systems we were born into. Just because it's not our fault, though, it doesn't mean it's not our responsibility to deal with these problems. And you'll see soon what the problems are, but just as a precursor, it being your responsibility but not your fault is like if I just dropped a newborn baby on your doorstep. It's not your fault, but the baby is now your responsibility. You can't just leave it there. So the same is true with the economy that we were born into. We are responsible for taking action, and I'll talk more about that soon. And also, before I start, I do want to note that there are many young people who are legitimately struggling to make payments, buy good food, or even pay for housing. So there are two parts to this video. The first part is the conditions we can't really control that much, like the systems and environments we live in. And these are the ones that are responsible for a lot of people's financial troubles, but pretty much solely responsible for the people who are really doing it hard and struggling to make it by. So the second part contains things that I think 90% of us can apply to our lives, and that's parts that are more attributable to us and that do have direct fixes from us. So in part one, we'll talk about the stuff that's not our fault. So firstly is housing and food costs. So it's pretty hard to say that Gen Zers are responsible for the ridiculous cost of living right now. The basic building blocks of financial stability, especially housing and food, have become much harder and much more expensive relative to income. So home ownership hasn't disappeared for young people, but has become extremely harder. The younger cohorts are entering adulthood with higher deposit barriers, higher rents, and a much bigger gap between wages and house prices. Home ownership is directly linked to financial stability and wealth building, so this one is definitely not a personal discipline issue. So there are many reasons for this, like zoning laws, not in my backyard resistance, and NIMBY policy, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically when property owners subtly or openly advocate against new building developments because high density housing around them would lower their housing price. And also slow construction, low housing supply. And I do realize this is political dynamite to say, but also temporary and permanent immigration increasing short-term demand. And that doesn't imply that immigration is the problem by itself, but it does mean that just with a simple math calculation, if population growth is faster than housing supply growth, young renters are usually the ones who feel it first. So what you can do about that, I'd say, as a quick note, those issues are both national and council. It's probably the one that's hardest to directly influence yourself. We'll get into it a bit more in the conclusion, but I think joining a local council, if you're of age, talking with people about it, getting educated primarily is the most important thing that you can do. Understand these problems, why they affect your community, perhaps another community that you like as well. You can look into moving there, understand the cause behind these problems. So the second thing that we can't control as much is instability due to rapid innovation. So technology is great, but a lot of Gen Z students and professionals are entering the workforce during a period where entire tasks and sometimes parts of jobs, or even all of jobs, are being automated by AI. So education systems, hiring systems, and regulations are moving slower than the technology itself. And I'm sure a lot of people have felt that. So the scary implication from that is that previous generations didn't have to ask themselves at ages 18 or 22 or 25, will my career path even exist in the same form in 10 years? They obviously had their own problems, but this specific kind of uncertainty is new. A lot of traditional paths that our parents and grandparents took for granted are now way less predictable. The silver lining is that there is incredible opportunity for people who use new technology well, and that's one of the solutions to this problem. So it's never been easier to get a product, service, or personal brand online using AI tools. And I just realized that sounded like the introduction to a sponsorship, but it most certainly is not. Dealing with that rapidly improving technology is also it's out of your reach generally, but try and be as educated as you can about it. Try and use it to your advantage, all these new things. There are ways where most of these tools can help you in some form. So remain up to date on that, read newsletters, etc. So third thing that we can't really control is the unregulated internet access we had in our youth. So Gen Zers were basically the guinea pigs of the internet and social media. When social media really blew up in the way we know today, Gen Z were the ones growing up inside it. And for the most part, there were no serious restrictions on her access to it. So today, even though you still have to be very careful online with children, there is much more public awareness, regulation, and parental concern around minors using the internet. And we just didn't have that to the same extent when we grew up. And I'm sure many people have felt that. It has affected the mental health of many of us, particularly young teenagers who see perfect bodies online. There's plenty of reported cases of permanent issues that arose from that with body image and image of how you view yourself. So that's very hard to fight against when you were 12 or 13. Like, that's really something that should have been done already, but unfortunately it just wasn't. So that's leading into the danger of it, which is building up this comparison at scale. We grew up seeing luxury lifestyles, perfect bodies, expensive holidays, designer clothes, new cars, and people our age supposedly making millions. And that badly damages your baseline. It makes normal life feel like failure, and it makes spending money to catch up feel way more tempting. So getting into part two, the stuff that's more our fault and that we can control. And this first point, the comparison lifestyle, draws a little bit from the previous one, and it's more so how to break out of that. So first of all, relative poverty is the idea that even if an entire country is rich in absolute terms, like the US, Australia, and a lot of Europe, people can still feel poor because they're constantly comparing themselves to people who seem much better off. And that's why you'll see reported happiness metrics where people in the poorest regions in the world report better happiness levels than the bottom 20% of people economically in the US. It's because relatively they feel quite well off in their country, but someone in the US who sees all these people doing so much better than them is obviously less happy because they're a lot more poor in their country and they expect more. So there is certainly truth to that, to the wealth gap problem. But on the other hand, there will always be someone better off than you on the other side of the country, literally flashing their new car in front of your face. And that's especially true in the internet era. This obviously makes you upset, makes you spend money on things you don't need just to keep up. And it's completely obvious from the increase in people financing expensive cars, paying rent in expensive places they don't need to be, constantly upgrading phones, buying designer clothes, or even dropping hundreds or thousands of dollars on a night out. The only fair comparison at the end of the day is you versus you from yesterday, not you versus some multimillionaire online, not you versus some guy pretending to be rich in a rented Lamborghini, and definitely not you versus someone who is quietly drowning in debt just to look successful. The next one is voluntary debt. So this is a huge one, absolutely huge. So not all debt is the same. Some debt can be productive, like buying a house, because even though it's still risky, you're buying the place you live in, and the asset may appreciate over time too, maybe even outpacing the interest. So some other debt is survival debt, like using credit because you genuinely can't afford food or rent that week. That is a very different situation. But then there's status debt, and this is the one that slowly destroys people. So getting into a loan for a sports car that you couldn't buy in cash is a one-way ticket to struggles. There are very few exceptions to that. Generally, you should never be financing a sports car, fancy truck, or really any new car at all if it puts pressure on your life. A car is already a depreciating asset, and when you combine the interest payments, it can be one of the worst value purchases you've ever made. The next one to look out for is student loans, and I don't think anyone would say they're inherently wrong, but they are absolutely a massively misused instrument. A degree can be a great investment if it leads to a career with strong earning potential, but taking on debt that serious for a degree with relatively weak job prospects is very dangerous. And unfortunately, about half of college graduates in the US, people debate that figure, but about half the college graduates in the US never end up using their degree, and then they're just stuck paying off the debt for years. So very important to be careful if you're not already in college about exactly what you want to do, and regardless of whether you enjoy it or not, how it's actually going to pay you back over time. And also, I can't remember the figure, it was something crazy in the US, the amount of unpaid scholarships there are and funds for students. So make sure you check out what scholarships could apply to you for college, because I still believe college is a great deal if you're going there for a significantly reduced price. And every year, millions and millions are left on the table in unclaimed scholarships. So make sure to see your eligibility there. The next kind of debt goes without saying, and it's any form of afterpay or financing small purchases like food. This should be an absolute last resort, and you should avoid it at all costs. It might sound insane to you, but I've literally seen people do weekly payments on a burrito and pay interest on it. It's just crazy because you see that initial payment is so much cheaper than the burrito, and you fall into their trap, and it's exactly what they want you to do, and you should absolutely avoid it. So the third thing that I think we can control a little more is the I deserve it and I need it economics. So hearing people say, I deserve this because I worked hard this week, or I need it to make me happy after saving up their money, is just incredibly painful to hear. So the point is, rewire your brain to understand that what you really deserve after months or years of hard work is not a thing you can buy with money. It's actually the money itself. That's the reward. So to illustrate this, I'll tell a story of two of my friends who I think represent this perfectly. So, by the way, these cases are not rare at all. These two friends, their archetype, although these ones might be a little extreme. So the first friend did really well for himself as a self-employed software contractor. He was smart in school, great at maths and science, and now he regularly has 20K or 25K after tax months. And the problem is, believe it or not, that he is literally living paycheck to paycheck. He rents some insane place, financed a new European car he didn't need, bought a Rolex, and parties all the time. I wouldn't even be surprised if he couldn't pull out $5,000 for an emergency, even though technically he's earned about $1 million. I always hear him make excuses for why he needs a new car to impress clients, or he needs a new watch to look respectable, or he deserves a $2,000 night out because he secured a big contract. And the saddest thing is, I think he genuinely believes it. He genuinely believes that he's doing it tough financially, even though he makes some people's yearly savings in 1 month. And now the second friend has a totally different story. He was never that smart in school, worked a minimum wage job part-time for most of it, went to his state university for pretty cheap, got a decent but not crazy well-paying job around $70,000 a year, and has been getting steady salary raises ever since. The craziest thing with him, and the most surprising, is that he has about $300,000 saved up in the stock market, just steadily growing from years of compounding. His rent is cheap because he lives with two friends, and to be honest, I was actually jealous of how fun the house was there. They're all in the same boat, like-minded people. And he owns a second-hand car, but it's very reliable, and he still even enjoys the small luxuries and the medium luxuries too. He imports this specialty coffee from, I think it's Australia or Brazil, and he still goes on a holiday every now and then too. So he actually made me understand the previous claim that what you deserve after working hard is the money itself. Buying something with that money is not claiming the reward, it's literally giving the reward away. So the second friend knows that if his boss fired him, he'd be fined for years, And so he's very relaxed because of that. He's very happy all the time because he knows that the stock portfolio he's sitting on will let him retire early or retire extremely wealthy later. And on the other hand, the second friend is constantly stressed, never happy. I haven't seen him happy since school because he's effectively living at a $0 net worth with the way he spends money. And those are just the habits he's built over time. It's the habit of thinking he deserves things, thinking he needs things when he really doesn't. And I guess out of all of this, you can really guess which of the two friends is doing better financially and health and happiness wise, even though one of them makes several times more than the other. The fourth reason I think we can change is being antisocial. So one thing nearly all financially successful people have is a network of people they can rely on. Some are lucky and get born with that network, but many of us have to build it for themselves. So this is an idea. This is actually where it might be a good idea to go out and have a few drinks or meet up with some friends for brunch and get the infamous $15 avo toast and oat milk latte with them. You need your friends, and one of the worst mistakes you can make is trying to solve your problems by being a lone wolf. So it was actually one of my personal biggest regrets in the first part of my college life was to lock down in my room and talk to nobody when exams came around and just focus as hard as I could, ignore people when they asked to hang out. And as a result, I actually did worse in that semester than I did in my later semesters where I would say yes to hanging out. I would budget my time very well and make sure that I'd always have time to hang out with friends. And it resulted in me being happier, me actually saving a bit more money somehow. It did correlate. And also just doing better in the exam. So the lone wolf strategy, it just does not work. But unfortunately, it seems to be really common with our generation. The individualism culture, the hustle culture of just locking down and not talking to people and doing your work. But it's for the movies and maybe the super geniuses. It just does not work for most of us. So do everything in your power to avoid having to say no when your friends ask to hang out. And if they aren't asking to hang out, be proactive in organizing times to hang out together. In addition, if you're a college student, go to those random networking or working events, even if you think they won't be helpful at all. I've actually met some lifelong friends from these random events that I just popped into and really didn't want to go to, wanted to just stay in bed. So they're extremely important. And as for the professional side too, a lot of opportunities don't come from applying online with 500 other people or 5,000 other people. They come from someone remembering your name, trusting you, and thinking like, actually, I know a person who would be good for this. So you achieve that by going to the networking events, by talking to peers. If you're a freshman or sophomore in college, then talk to the juniors and seniors, because when you're a senior, they're going to be in the job force. So it's useful to be friends with them, and so they can help you out in your career. And so to finish off with everything, I wanted to say a few things. So just because some systems around us fail, it doesn't mean we can just flounder around and act like it's not our responsibility to deal with them. Just like the newborn baby example I had at the start, if I just came to your porch and dropped a newborn baby there, it's not your fault it's there, but you still have to deal with it in a responsible way. So other generations dealt with these system-wide issues too. The best way to fix these issues, if you want to, is to get well read, especially for the issues that aren't our fault as much. You want to educate yourself on your nation or state's politics, maybe even join a local council or group if you can. Be the person who always gives a straight, factual answer when someone asks you a complex political or financial question. If it's not really your vibe to be that active though, the next best thing to do is to just get smart. Get smart. Understand the world. Understand the dynamics that shape where you live, and get out there and talk to like-minded people. On the practical side, keep your fixed costs low, avoid status debt, build income-producing skills, invest consistently, build a network, understand the systems around you well enough that they don't just happen to you. And that all sounds like broken record advice, but the basics do work. And when you really look around and focus on these things, you'll see how many people are violating this so-called basic advice. If you do that basic advice every day, you will be okay. And so the next hardworking Gen Z students will become the next lawyers, politicians, executives, founders, builders, and more. And there's still plenty of time for you to be among them. Remember that every legal, economic, and local system throughout history was only temporary. And eventually, it'll be the people from our generation who mold the world to our liking.